You've been on here before.
You. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started and say, first of all, good afternoon and welcome to our next session in a year-long training collaboration between HDI and UK Healthcare. These sessions started in April of 2023, so we're on to November already. And they started actually before I officially worked for HDI. And since I'm fairly new, I think I said this last time. Well, first of all, my name is Nancy Savage. I'm fairly new to HDI, so I've been enjoying being on these sessions because it's given me a good grasp of everything that goes on at HDI, the different projects, programs. So I'm pretty excited about being on these. So I've enjoyed them. So today is November, and our topic is going to be the Employment First in Kentucky. Our presenter is Katie Wolf Whaley, and she has I was just telling her, I did a sneak peek and I listened to the HDI, State of HDI podcast, and I was really impressed with all of everything that she does. She's the principal investigator of the Supported Employment Training Project, the president of Kentucky APSE, former board member of the National APSE, and currently the chair of the Kentucky Employment First Council. I hope I got all of that, Katie. So welcome, and I am going to turn this presentation over to you. I forgot to say one thing. We are recording this, so we'll share the link afterwards. And if anyone has questions, you can ask them in the chat. I'll be monitoring that and or verbally. So, Katie, welcome, and it's all yours.
Very good. Thanks, Nancy. Hello. I am Katie Wolf Whaley, as she said, and have all the titles that she said. And so I'm going to talk about what that means. And what it really means is I spend most all of my time here at UK talking to people across Kentucky and sometimes other parts of the country about employment. A lot about employment first, especially lately, but overall about employment of people with disabilities and how to make that happen and why it makes sense and why it's a good idea and all of those kind of things. So for those of you who are here, thank you for being a part of this and curious and wanting to know more about disability and people across our Commonwealth and how UK healthcare can better serve people and really just help Kentuckians have, I think, probably overall better life outcomes, which is what we all want. So that's an exciting shared goal to have. So I talk a lot. I'm slide dependent. So I do have slides. I think you can see my screen. I hope you can. So this is the priority statement in what is now Employment First law here in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And it was first signed into executive order in 2018, renewed in 2020, and then signed into law in 2022. And it really hits a priority and a focus for what our expectations are for Kentuckians who have disabilities. And so the statement reads that the General Assembly finds and declares that it is the policy of the Commonwealth of Kentucky that competitive integrated employment in the community shall be considered the first and primary option for persons with disabilities of working age who desire to become employed. What that means, I think, is that, so when it talks about competitive integrated employment, it is defined in state law. It's referring to a larger federal law that oversees disability employment services across our country. And it means a regular job in a typical place of business where people are paid fair wage. They have access to benefits and promotions, that they are around other non-disabled people. It's not a specific or special job or business created just to hire people with disabilities, that we are looking at helping people have integrated employment where other people have jobs and being a part of the workforce because people can be, for one thing, and because employers need employees. And so that's what this is looking at, and that we have a lot of services around people with disabilities and a focus on day services for people who happen to have a disability. And this is setting a priority that in our society, when we look at the lives of adults typically go to work. And so why wouldn't we have that same expectation for everyone? And so this sets a priority statement around services and supports that people receive. And then we can think about some of the the bigger pictures of why, which if you've come to this series that HDI has had, or you've been listening to the recordings, chances are good you have a pretty good background, an idea of why some of the reasons for this are, right? But I like to think of these as often as a two-pronged issue. There's the disability service system that should be prioritizing employment as a service for people, and then a workforce development issue, because we know that businesses across our Commonwealth need employees, and there are people who are unemployed that want to go to work. And so why wouldn't we want to put that together? The reality is that we know that Kentucky ranks 48th in what we call the employment gap. So when we look at people with a disability who are employed, the rate is around 30 something of all disabilities. When we look at people without disabilities who are employed, the rate is around 70 something. And that, I don't have the number off the top of my head, that gap, the 40 some percentile gap, ranks us 48th in the country, which is huge, right? And we know if we look at people just with intellectual developmental disabilities, of those who receive publicly funded services in our state, only 11% of adults are working. If we look at trends, because we know, I'm going to guess everybody on here probably knows somebody who happens to have a disability, and chances are good you know somebody with a disability who is employed. We know there are good stories. We know that there are people who have been working, but we also know that really, even across our country, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is about double that of folks without disabilities. And that trend has remained stagnant for decades. And so that's a problem. So even though we see some people having success, and certainly there are some people who have been employed for a very long time, overall, it has become a persistent issue in our workforce and in our Commonwealth and across the country. And it's a cultural issue, because society has, I like to say, we let people with disabilities opt out of the workforce, but you almost don't even have to opt out, because you're not assumed to be in or to be headed that way. And so that has taken a big shift to not only think about people who grow up with a disability or acquire a disability to remain in the workforce or to join the workforce and have that expectation for kids who happen to have disabilities as we do other kids, but to then prioritize that over other types of places people with disabilities might go or things they might do. And really that expectation of having people be seen for what they have to offer and contribute, rather than just as that disability or what's wrong with them, or just receiving healthcare services. But people want a good life, right? Healthcare systems work hard to keep people healthy. And so people want a good life and to be able to use what they have to offer. And so employment first really is prioritizing and being intentional around people who want to go to work and are unemployed, and businesses who need employees, and making sure that there is a focus that those folks find each other, so that people have better outcomes in life and that employers find employees. Because we know that everybody benefits when people go to work. I know there are days that you might wake up and think, I might not love my job 100% today, and I'd kind of rather stay in bed. But I'm going to hope that we all have jobs we like, that we are thankful for a paycheck and the benefit. We're all UK employees for the benefits that we get through that, and that brings a lot of value to our life. And so there's a lot of value for folks with disabilities who are looking to go to work, right? To receive a fair wage and benefits and access to good healthcare and just other people, and using what we have to offer that is valued and to be appreciated for what we bring to the table. Families benefit from seeing their loved ones included and being seen for what they have to offer. And if you're in the healthcare setting, and especially with younger folks with disabilities, then you see families are a huge part of that circle of support. And so just seeing them grow up and to become employed is really powerful. All of our communities benefit. Getting to know and see people for what they have to offer, and then the taxes that come from that, right? When people go to work, they pay taxes, and that increases all of our service systems. And when people go to work, it's fair, it's complex, right? If someone receives supplemental security income for the money that you earn, your check goes down a bit. there are formulas and there are ways to figure those things out, but our tax coffers benefit when people go to work. They pay into the system and they take less out of it. And so overall, that part of our society benefits. And again, employers benefit because they get good employees who can help get the work done that needs to be done in our businesses across our Commonwealth. So I come from a standpoint that I believe everybody has something to offer that's worthy of pay. They just do. Whether they have put that into practice yet and looked for a job or not, everybody has something to offer that's worthy of pay. And it's figuring out what people have to offer and what business, particular business, could use that, and making sure that it's a win-win for both, which is what we want for all of our employees, right? Is that people bring to the table what UK healthcare needs in different areas. And so you get what you need, and people can share their gifts and their presence with other people and earn the benefits of employment. So these are all Kentuckians who have a disability. And because of the nature of my particular work, as Nancy said, I direct the Supported Employment Training Project, and supported employment is a service that offers assistance in finding a job in the form of an employment specialist, a professional who gets to know people and businesses and helps to make those connections. So we'll talk about how that could be beneficial to you all as an employer as well. But supported employment focuses on people who have a most significant impact of disability. So these are all people who would meet the definition of most significant impact of disability, who are successfully employed in different types of jobs all across our state. And so I'm going to go through a few of their stories because I'm coming to you today with the thought that you are, of course, your healthcare providers and Kentuckians and all those good things, but your employers, you hire people throughout UK healthcare. And so thinking about people and what they've done in other businesses hopefully can help translate where that might fit and envision employment opportunities for more people within UK healthcare than maybe you had thought about before. And so this is Lucy. Lucy is someone, she graduated from high school here in Lexington. These are all people we have permission to share their stories that I do through trainings and some other videos that HDI has put out there in the world. So Lucy did graduate from high school. She is autistic and was looking for help in finding a job. Wasn't quite sure what she was going to do, and knew that she had a harder time learning and grasping ideas and communicating in some ways than other people do. And she was in supported employment, so paired with an employment specialist who could get to know her and figure out what she's good at and what she's interested in and what motivates her and how she does learn best and what it takes for her to grasp all of those concepts and to be able to do what needs to be done. And so the employment specialist, Rachel, figured out, Lucy mentioned that she liked kids. And it turns out she had volunteered, I think, in her church nursery working with young children before, and that she really is passionate about helping other people. There were some other people in her life that needed help at school, at church, in different parts of her life. And those were her favorite things to talk about, was where she had been able to be helpful to other people. She likes to be busy. She likes to be where the action is. So, right, just because we hear that Lucy is a young autistic woman, autism impacts people in really different ways. So it's figuring out what that means for Lucy. And Lucy likes to be where there's a lot going on and to be busy and to be engaged. And she likes to be needed. So there was a lot that appealed to her, and liking children and being around children, and that idea of being a helper and being busy and being where there's lots of action. Because if you've been in childcare centers, there's not a lot of downtime. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of noise. There's always something going on. And so that kind of a culture and nature of work worked really well for Lucy and what works best for her. And so Rachel was able to connect her with some childcare centers around the Lexington area and see what it was like at these different kind of centers and what their needs were and what the requirements for hiring were. And so she ended up getting a job at a childcare center, and in talking about their openings and the different classrooms, she ended up working in the 1-year-old room because kids need. She likes it there because the kids are a little bit more needy. I'm not sure that's the right word. I'm not in early childhood. But they're not doing as much on their own as when they're 4 and 5 year olds and getting ready to go to kindergarten. And so there were a lot of things about this particular job that just fit really well with who Lucy is. And they needed a teacher assistant in this classroom who could be down on the floor, and you see her there reading and interactive with kids. And Rachel could offer that kinds of other support of, this is how Lucy learns best. And so she could work with teachers on, if this is your lesson plan and this is what you need Lucy to do, how to chunk that information into clear expectations so Lucy understood what needed to be done and how to phrase things with children, and not just don't tell them no, but we need to redirect them. Well, okay, but like in a practical sense, what does that mean? And so Rachel could help translate that information and be that go-between between a very busy employer who has demands in this daycare center and an employee to make sure everybody gets what they need out of that. Megan was a woman with serious mental illness who lived in central Kentucky also. And in getting to know her, the employment specialist realized that she loves to bake. She likes to cook. She had not worked in a commercial kitchen, so I'll give you that. But this was an interest of hers and something she liked to do. She did finish high school. She had been homeschooled for a lot of it because of her mental health issues. And part of that was that she hears voices. And so that made being in school difficult in some ways. But the employment specialist worked with Megan on, what do you like to do and where are you at your best? And she really enjoyed baking and cooking and the detail and the attention that's needed to do that, to get a recipe exactly right, to make sure things are very precise. And then went around and talked to local catering companies and cafes and bakeries, and happened to be talking to the owner of a small catering company that includes a bakery, and said that Megan loves to bake. And the owner was just like, well, I need me somebody who loves to do this kind of work. And so she applied for the position and got it. And one of the really cool things about the story is, as she's so focused, because it's a thriving small business, and so there's always food to be prepared and cakes to be decorated and things to be done, it keeps the voices at bay because she's so focused on her work. And her attention to detail and the change it made in Megan's life was really pretty incredible. And the business gets an employee who shows up for every shift and wants to be there and is focused on her work. And so it worked out really well for everybody. And while she did go into a bakery, places like a UK healthcare also have food service, right? There's lots of places that need this kind of service. And so in all these stories, a lot of the skills could be transferable to different types of places as well. This is Michael, and this is a little bit older story. So I've been a patient in UK healthcare, and maybe you've automated some of the things he's done. But Michael was someone who he has spastic cerebral palsy, and he's really precise in what he does, but he's not always the fastest in everything. So quality over quantity was something that the employment specialist knew they were looking for with Michael, and had a relationship with another hospital here in Kentucky, and just did some observation and talked to different people there, and found at the time, the phlebotomist job, as you all would know, was big and busy, and there's no room for error, right? And so Michael has spastic cerebral palsy. He's not sticking anybody with needles, but he did part of that job at the time of when the samples would be collected, making sure the information was entered into the computer really accurately, because he has great attention to detail and doesn't make mistakes. And then because he's a wheelchair user, he could get those samples down to the lab and back quickly. And it relieved that time that the phlebotomists and other skilled staff on the floor were having to spend by transferring things down to the lab, and he filled that role. So this was a job that actually I think hadn't been posted, but made a lot of sense. And so they created a position for him to do this. And I know I see little robots going through the Kentucky clinic, and I assume those are the kind of things that might be in them, but it's a really good example of what are some of your staff who have high skilled positions, nurses, dietitians, whoever it is that has those certifications, what are some of the tasks that keep them really busy? I think we all hear stories that a lot of workplaces are a bit overwhelmed and they're understaffed, and it's hard to find people with those certifications and skills that we need these days. And so, what are for the folks who are there tasks that take up their time that maybe, I don't want to say burden, but lead to that overwhelmedness of employees, to the overall workload that goes on in departments and hospital floors? And could some of those tasks be done by a different employee who might not have that high level certification or skill, but the tasks that don't need that type of certification or skill, that someone else who may happen to have a disability could do effectively and efficiently, that frees up the higher skilled employees to do other types of work, that focus on their high skilled. The person with a disability who comes in that doesn't have those certifications would make a fair wage, but it would be a lesser wage than someone who has those higher skills and those certifications and that education background. And so it can be a really good way for a business to get the overall work need done and let people breathe and focus on the work that they're really good and that you need them to be doing. And so that's one example at a hospital here in Kentucky where that worked out. Daniel worked at a pediatrician's office here in Kentucky, I think over in the Louisville area, and he would do some of the administrative tasks of pulling charts for the day, getting things ready, making sure things were set for payroll, and some of those kind of tasks. He worked on a part-time basis. He loved it there and was a really big help to the other folks in that medical practice in the office. And the other really cool thing that the doctor found in this practice was that because Michael worked in the front office and he was seen by patients and would greet patients and their families when they came in, families appreciated seeing a young man with an apparent developmental disability because he had patients who had kids who had developmental disabilities. And the parents, you don't have to tell them about employment first. You don't have to rattle off the law. You don't have to hand them a pamphlet about employment or hook them up. They can just see, here's a young man with a disability and he's working and he has a good job and he likes what he's done. And this is a really neat guy who gets along well with his coworkers. I want that for my child. And so it was a way not only for the medical practice to have a good employee, but to share that message with their patients and their families of look what is possible in life. And so that was a powerful part of that story as well. Ellie was a woman who has a job at the YMCA in Louisville, and she was hired they were backlogged. They just were, with lots of paper that needed to be digitized, and even forms that come in on paper that need to be digitized. And so she was hired to do those tasks. Again, it was freeing up other people to do the main parts of their tasks, and this just wasn't getting done in the manner and the speed that it needed to be. So she was hired to focus on these tasks. This picture I like because it shows some of the equipment that the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, their Division of Blind Services, was able to provide and help hook them up with, because Ellie has low vision. And so with this equipment, she's able to see, like you can see a barcode, which would be really small on a piece of paper, but it's big on that magnification screen. So she's able to do the work she needs to do. And I think someone else probably talked about universal design and assistive technology. So this is just a really cool example of that, practically speaking, in the workplace, and that state services through Voc Rehab were able to connect this employer, not just with Ellie as a good employee, but with that technology that allows her to be able to do her job well. So how does this work in the real world, and how might you find people? Because I talk to employers who are like, well, that's really interesting, Katie, but I've never had anybody with a disability like that apply. Well, maybe you have and you don't know, and maybe people don't know how to find your jobs. I am happily employed by the University of Kentucky. I've also gotten on our page where one would apply for a job, and if you don't know how to look for jobs, it's really overwhelming. So it could be that people don't know how to apply for the jobs that you have open. But there are people in our community. We have the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation here. We have multiple agencies in Central Kentucky that are based here in Lexington that focus on supported employment and other services to connect Kentuckians, local residents with disabilities who have a lot to offer, to connect with businesses and employers that need those types of services. And so these employment specialists get to know people with disabilities in our community and what they're good at and what they want to do and what it's going to take for them to be successful, so that they can help bridge that gap and suggest either formal accommodations or modifications, or just provide that added level of instruction and support to not just help people learn the job, but to keep the job. Because not only is finding employees can be a challenge these days, but turnover is expensive. And so these services can not just help locate employees, but focus on maintaining employment and staying successfully employed as well. They also not only get to know the job seekers, but get to know your needs and what are your hiring needs and what are your processes, so that they can make a good match, right? Ellie might be really, really successful at the Y, but maybe it wouldn't be as successful in a different business where the culture was different, right? She liked the idea of the YMCA where membership is a value, or a place where people are valued and looked at as a whole. And that doesn't happen at every business. And so the employment specialist gets to know your needs and culture to make sure that there's a potential for a good job match and for success on both ends. And so how can you reach out? It could be just, and maybe HDI could help with this, but making those connections with the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation is often the starting point for these services in our communities across Kentucky. But how do you connect with employment specialists and either invite them in or record things like how to navigate the job search process and what do the different job levels mean? If I know I have somebody with a high school diploma but doesn't have a college education, what does that mean and what kind of jobs might I be looking for? If I know somebody who has these kind of skills, how do I search for those kind of positions to help people navigate your open positions and have those, or to have conversations with individual people about what your needs are. I've known some businesses who have invited people in to say, this is what it's like to work here, right? These are our typical requirements. This is how you get your foot in the door. And this is what it takes to be a successful employee here, so that the employment specialists understand your culture. You can give that overview, once, twice, record it, whatever it might be, so people know, okay, well, if I'm thinking about somebody wanting a job at UK Healthcare, these are some really key things we need to keep in mind that are those key values and things that UK Healthcare holds dear, that could make or break the success of an employee. So having those shared conversations or shared information in ways could be a really good place to start to think about how we might attract people with disabilities and locate people with disabilities, to say, if we want to intentionally be have a diversified workforce and make sure folks with disabilities are included in that, then these are some areas of intentional conversation that we can look to having. Look at that at 1:30. Are there questions? I just talked a lot.
That was awesome. Actually, that was really cool to hear about the employment specialists and how they connect employers and employees and how you have to know both parties. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
That's awesome.
Everybody's posted a position, even people who, plenty of people can figure out how to find positions at UK, and you can I've gotten 100 applications and a lot of them look the same. It's really nice to know somebody and talk to somebody who knows that person and can vouch for them and share more information to see if it could potentially be a good fit. It helps stack the deck in the likelihood of success in a really helpful way to employers.
Well, that was awesome. I'm sorry we're out of time. That went by so quickly, but we do appreciate you coming and talking today. And I'm going to share the link, and I can share the website as well. I know there's a website. So I think that's about it. unfortunately, no more time left, but thank you so
All right,
much,
thank
Katie.
you all.
Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you. Thanks.